All right. For my number five is the Spawn soundtrack. From like the Spawn soundtrack with Mike. I think it's Michael J. White who starred in that movie.
For
Spawn.
Spawn. Oh, I thought you had said Swan. That's why I was like, I have no idea what
Yeah.
Swan is. But
Spawn.
Spawn, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It was a really cool. It had a really cool soundtrack that was good for the movie. My favorite song in that soundtrack was One Man Army with Prodigy and Tom Morello.
Nice.
For my number four, uh, I'm going with the Tank Girl soundtrack.
Take it back to Pam Anderson days.
No, it's I forget her name, Skinny Girl.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's I think it's Pam
Tank Girl.
Anderson.
Tank Girl.
Oh, Naomi Watts. Gotcha, gotcha. Actually, I've never seen this one. Oh, this is that one that was in the 80s. Oh, early 90s. This was
Yeah,
a
it's way back.
bad movie.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I kind of like the song Roads by Portishead in this soundtrack and Army of Me by Bjork.
Nice.
For my third soundtrack, I'd be going with the original Matrix.
Let's see, Tank Girl.
Matrix movie, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the Dracula song by Rob Zombie. It was in one of the club scenes, and Rock is Dead by Marilyn Manson. And
Nice.
Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine is a really thought provoking song. Sorry about that. So, my number two is the Blade soundtrack. Because
Yep, that's a great soundtrack.
Yep. And my favorite song in that soundtrack was Blade by KRS-One.
Yep. Yep.
Respect. And
Yep.
And Deadly Zone, which featured Mobb Deep and I forget who the other rapper is. I think it's Bounty Killer. I forget. There's a bunch of them.
All
And
right.
for my all-time number one geek comic book movie soundtrack is The Crow, the first one. I think the first Crow movie had a great soundtrack. It had like The Cure.
That was a good punk rock soundtrack.
Yep, it had a Cure. It had Nine Inch Nails. It had Violent Femmes, Rage Against the Machine, Henry Rollins. You know, that was out. Yeah, number one for me.
That was legit. I like those picks. I like those picks a lot. All right, Jason.
You go next because I got suddenly feeling that I'm going to overlap with you anyway, with you guys anyway.
No, you probably will not overlap with a single one with me. Believe me. Go ahead. Go first.
Well, there's a couple. See, I try to think about movies. The thing about us that goes around in my head is that I'm aware that from my days in editing and filming that putting pre-existing songs is like fan service. It's a bit of a sugar rush, and if it's not done well, because I've done this myself when I've made films, you use it to get out of jail. Like if you got a scene that's not working, or you got a movie that's not working, you pump in a song that everyone loves, bad to the bone, and you just try to cover it, and you try to cover your tracks. You try to sugarcoat. So, and one of the things we did at film school is our film teachers didn't allow us to use pre-existing music, so we wouldn't be able to use it as a cop out.
Nice.
But when it's used well, as we've discussed, it should be able to inject something into the story. It should help do something to the story. So one of the first ones that comes to mind to me that does use a lot of music, sometimes well and sometimes not well, I guess it's Geek, which is the Umbrella Academy.
Nice. Nice.
And I give it full marks, particularly for its opening song, which does a lot of heavy lifting, which is I Wish You Were, I Think We're Alone Now. which,
Yes.
if you look that song in the context lyrically, what's happening on the screen, what's happening in the story characters. If you look at the age of the characters, so they're all dancing in their own little boxes, if you remember, in their own rooms,
Yep.
because they all think they're alone at the start of the series. They're individuals; they have nothing to do with each other. The song speaks to that. It shows where they're at. The whole thing is very, very well done. It does a lot of heavy lifting as far as the story is concerned. Not to mention that as an audience, think you're alone now. Like you get into it. But it does drop the ball on several occasions, and does what there's a scene there where they have a big fight and they use a Kiss song. I was made for loving you, baby. Nothing to do with anything. Just what is this song doing here? So they don't get a complete getaway from me. Matrix is a very good example of, Wake Up is perfect to capture the mood of the ending of that movie.
Yes.
The fact that they went back to it for the Resurrections, come on, guys. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. But, yeah, you can't go past the Matrix soundtrack. Just that edgy thing that runs the whole movie. Iron Man, I like the way they used AC/DC because, okay, I love AC/DC. But it does capture who Iron Man is.
How come you don't say it Akadaka?
Because no one knows who Akadaka is, all right? It's AC/DC. I've been out of Australia for 10 years. So it's got, but they don't overdo it. But there is moments there. And I guess I've got to go outside Iron Man movies. The way they use it when in the Avengers, when you've got Loki there doing his thing in Germany, and all of a sudden, out comes Captain America, confronts him, and all of a sudden you hear, I think it's Back in Black or something, and it just says so much in that half a beat. Oh, here's Iron Man, like he's dark. He's pushing himself into this scene. And that's of course going to create conflict. I don't know what number I'm up to right now. The opening, going back to Marvel, the opening and last tunes they used for Endgame was fascinating to me. You probably won't remember them because they're not well known, common. They're not modern songs. It's the song that's when Tony is playing, those games with Gamora. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I heard it, I thought to myself, "What's this song? Like, this is the most anticipated movie in the history of the world. Why are you starting up with this song like this?" And it fascinated me. I just always get fascinated when directors and editors make choices that are completely different, right? They just go outside the norm and they pick something that... And then the last song, which makes a lot more sense. But again, they don't finish with a beautiful modern love song by, Richard Marx or Ed Sheeran. They pick an old song from back in the day, and that goes over the credits. It's the end of this massive storytelling, and I love that. I love it when you get surprised. Oh my gosh, I wouldn't have done that. Why did you do that?
It's not a hype song, so
right.
It's surprising. Yeah.
But I have to go back, and I think I'm stealing your thunder on this one, Gift. I do have to go to Into the Spider-Verse.
Let's go.
That movie is remarkable on every level, right? To use a quote from another movie, it ticks all the boxes, creates its own boxes, and ticks those too. The music captures Miles Morales. It captures his world, his energy, the energy on the screen, the graphic, the animation. And even though it's not necessarily my primary form of music, it gets me into that movie, into that story. And I mean, that's a brilliant movie. We should talk about it one day, but I hope I haven't stolen your thunder there, Gift.
You have not, believe me. I didn't expect anybody to do it, but I don't disagree with any of the points. And actually, obviously some of those I put as honorable mentions, like the Blade soundtrack was an honorable mention soundtrack to me because of how the original Blade, it was just how intense. It was a great soundtrack. But for me, I had to hit a different level. So for me, the number one soundtrack for me, number 5 soundtrack for me was Batman and Robin. Terrible movie, amazing soundtrack. And I have to say, like, what they did for the trailer, they utilizing a Kiss from a Rose by Seal initially, and then also kicking in with Look Into My Eyes by Bone Thugs and Harmony. That was one of the first Bone Thugs and Harmony songs I heard, and it had the perfect catchy tune. Look into my eyes and tell me what it is you see, what it is you see. Like, it was so ominous and dark, and you were like, oh man, this movie's gonna be dope, and it definitely wasn't. But it set the mood of what a Batman movie could be. It just was for the wrong franchise, for the wrong movie. It should have been for Forever or for Batman Returns. Then number 4 on my list, while it holds some of my favorite songs, I think overall it just doesn't match to my top 3. A Goofy Movie. A Goofy Movie has one of the most memorable 4 songs that you could ever ask for. You got Stand Out to open up the movie. Stand out above the crowd, even if you gotta shout out loud. You know, and you got After Today, just kicking that out, and then you have just it was just a slew. Those were the ones. After Today and Stand Out are number 1 and 2, with Tevin Campbell singing those ones, which were just spectacular. Then it just sandwiches in so well from there. Number 3, I'm with Jason, is Into the Spider-Verse. It is a complete album. It is as complete an album that worked with its movie. Like you said, it set the tone for the scenes. It created the mood. It allowed everything to go through. And the reason why it's just number 3 is because who I have for number 1 and 2, I think, is they took the template from 1 and 2 to help work with Into the Spider-Verse and go from there. So my number 2 soundtrack is the Men in Black soundtrack. Like, this one.
Really?
I mean, let's start off with Here Comes the Men in Black by Will Smith. That was a number 1 hit song out of a movie soundtrack. That, like, I didn't realize at the time how unheard of that was. Like, that was unheard of to be able to get a number 1 track out of a soundtrack. And he set a trend with that one. I think maybe Kiss from a Rose was that, and what comes for my number 1, but it was that. It was the album that introduced us to Alicia Keys. And this was her first song on here with Donna D, Sexy Thing, brought her in. Honestly, it was also the first CD I ever bought. First CD I ever bought in my life. And it is a Legends ball. Like having Jermaine and Snoop Dogg, Genuine, De La Soul in it, early Destiny's Child. Like, this was the person who produced this. They had vision. They saw the future. But I don't think anything can ever top a soundtrack as my number 1.
Go.
All right.
And my number 1 soundtrack all time is the original Space Jam soundtrack.
Do it.
Nothing but bangers. There's no bad songs in this. All right. The commercials only gave us I Believe I Can Fly, which I don't care, no matter, despite the fact that R. Kelly is an absolute piece of shit. That is a golden song. That is the song that until recently would just get you hyped to go do anything. I believe I can fly. Oh,
it's a good song.
But like you're hitting it high. Fly like an eagle, or hit 'em high, hit 'em high, hit 'em low, hit 'em low, hit 'em low, hit 'em.
Busta Rhymes.
Yo, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, this whole soundtrack was just, it was bonkers. The movie, mid. But the soundtrack, I think, made the movie much bigger than what I actually think the movie was capable of doing.
I enjoyed that Busta Rhymes Hit 'em High, Hit 'em High.
Yes, what? Busta Rhymes, LL Cool J? Yo, freaking Method Man? Like, Redman? Oh, bruh.
Well, there it is. There it is.
Yeah.
A very wide spectrum from what we expect from geeks around the world. There we go. There we go.
Yes, indeed.
Let's remind our friends to please click on the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you know when we have new videos out.
Subscribe!
God will die. Will die.